I love that every day something different. You were doing absolutely something different every day. One day I'll be in the vineyard, the next day I'll be putting wine to a barrel, the next day I'll be in trade trying to sell the wine. It really is something different each day. I guess what I love the most about it is the people. Like when I started in wine, I guess I was coming from a place where I, had lost interest in my job I was doing. I found that spark again. I found that passion, those people, the people in. You don't go into wine for the money. It doesn't pay well. You go into it because people are passionate about what they do, and it's sort of like a big family. It's a small industry, I'd say. So you know someone through someone, or someone will give you advice. You've got an issue, and someone even from the States might comment or say this is what we do here, and everyone's so open. And yeah, so really it's just the people, I think, and the love of what we do.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. We are coming to you from a different part of the world today. I'm in Southeast Asia, and my guest is in another location entirely, but a location that has wonderful wine. Can you tell us who you are and what
Yeah,
you
good
do?
morning. So I am Chrissie Smith from Intrepidus Wines, coming from Canberra, starting to get cold now in Australia. I am a
Yeah,
viticulturist by trade, so I consult and contract to vineyards throughout Canberra and surrounds, and then have my own wine label. So Intrepidus Wines. So grow some grapes and buy in grapes from Hilltops and Young. So yeah.
that's awesome. Well, it's awesome to meet you, first of all, but I want to know, how did you get into this beautiful, wonderful world of wine? How did you
Yeah,
get started in the
in a
industry?
very different way. So my background is in disability. So I was in England working with acquired brain injury rehab, and came back to Australia and was all set to open up. Well, my dream was to open up a acquired brain injury rehab centre here. At that point, we didn't have much for younger people that had brain injuries.
Wow.
Um, and then so I live in Yass and was commuting, doing shift work in Canberra, which is an hour's drive. Came off a night shift and rolled my car when I was pregnant with my eldest. So
Wow.
decided I'm not doing shift work anymore. And then went into the family business. We had an air conditioning business whilst I had kids. And then unfortunately went through a divorce and needed a new job. And met a winemaker in a bar who said, come and do vintage. He knew that I loved my wine. And then just got the bug. I was like, right, this is what I'm doing. Enrolled in uni, and 9 years later, this is where I am.
I love that. I love how those little choices can help us find a bigger path. You don't always realize that something that might seem small is actually a like small choice in your life. Like this little thing, like maybe I'll turn left today instead of turning right. But that could be the thing that takes you in a whole new direction. And you don't even realize it until it's years later and you're going, oh, that little choice right there that had all of this thing, that it changed in my life. For me, it was moving to Southeast Asia because, I was living in Los Angeles. I'm actually originally from the Napa Valley, which is why I love wine and how I got going in the wine stuff. But then I moved to LA and I was doing graduate school and it just wasn't working. And after university, I had lived in Southeast Asia. But when I moved to Southeast Asia, back to Southeast Asia, it was because all of this other stuff wasn't going right, but yet all these doors opened because of it. And it was just like a little bit of this finding where I was supposed to be. And I think that one of the things that I love about that is sometimes you have to let things unfold, which is why I'm actually fascinated by winemaking because there is a lot of like hurry up and wait. Like there's a lot of like sitting there, seeing what's going to happen, seeing how the grape is going to grow and evolve. And then, like, from what I hear from winemakers, then there's suddenly like this quick action, like, oh my God, we got to work right now. But I want to ask you that because you work both in the vineyard and in winemaking. For people outside the wine world, what's the difference between growing great grapes and turning them into wine? Or is it the same thing?
Well, a lot of it's intertwined, but two very different roles and patients, I guess. So the grape growing is farming, basically agriculture. You are growing a crop. You are having to
Yeah.
work with something that's live. You are having to, I guess, nurture it to get to where you want. The weather might not be kind. You've got to grow it basically, and there's a lot of things which are beyond your control with the growing. Um,
Right.
Winemaking, obviously, you're working with what fruit you then get, but there are a lot of ways in which you can. A lot of choices, I guess. You can control the ferment temperature. You can control what yeast you want to use. You can control what oak you want to use. So it's a lot more structured, I guess, in the winemaking compared to the growing, where you're really at nature's mercy, I guess, and just having to nurture them through to the end point.
That's interesting to me. It's I have never been great with growing plants. I love them. I have, like, my great aunt, and she was probably one of the best had the best green thumbs ever. She had no formal degrees, but she consulted with the University of Toronto as, like, one of their experts, because if they had a plant that was having problems, exotic, local, whatever, they would bring it to her, and she'd be like, "Oh, it just needs some of this," and it's just these plants loved her. And yet I sit there and I go, you know, sometimes I have a hard time understanding what it needs, but yet it's a living thing that does its own thing, that likes some things, that dislikes other things. So I'm fascinated about that with grape growing, because these plants have their own personality. And I hear different varietals have even further different personalities. Have you had any varietals that you love and some that are just
Yeah,
ones that you
well,
love to
never
hate?
in my dreams did I think I would be farming. I am not very great at growing anything other than grapevines. People will come to me and be like, "Oh, how should I prune this tree?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I
Mm,
don't have a degree in peaches." It's really like learning. A lot of it's observation. Like you do your botany and you do your plant protection and all that sort of stuff at uni, but until you're actually out there and observing what's going on and learning the symptoms and how do you fix that, like that's when it really, I think, comes into to honing in on the trade, I guess. Um, Varieties. So in Canberra, we're
yeah,
known for Shiraz and Riesling. But I love to work with a lot of Italian varieties. So Nero, love
yeah.
to work with Nero. Um, it's yeah, growing really
Ooh,
well in Australia. Um, I think some of those Italian and Spanish varieties are really sort of coming into their own. So yeah,
that's so interesting. I love Australian wine, and because it's interesting because I grew up in California. I'll love a Napa Cab. It's got its own flavor, but, like, when I moved to Southeast Asia, most of the wines that we had access to were Australian because it's just way closer. And I kind of got hooked on Australian wines, and it's interesting too because they have this uniquely different flavor, There's just this different vibe to them, and it's interesting too, like, it's one of the I love talking about location with wine, and don't make me say the French word because I'm so bad at saying terroir. But, it's so interesting. How do you find that location makes your wine so special there in Australia,
yeah.
especially
I
in
think we're
Canberra?
lucky that we don't have to work to constraints that some of the European countries have to work with in regards to rules of what we can plant and not plant. But uh, I think, say, Canberra, for an example, we're known as cool climate. So in the summer, we get to 40 degrees, but overnight, it might go down to 15. So
Mhm.
you have these longer ripening periods. Um, I think the Australian wine, I guess, yeah, it's a little, I like to think of it as a little bit like as I said, not having those rules, so we can play with varieties, um, alternate varieties. We can pick when we want to pick. If that means a lighter style with lower alcohol, drink it a bit easier. Um, yeah, I just think certainly for Canberra, it's that fresher, younger, um, more like you can drink them early. You don't have to age them. You don't have to have them with food. They're more that medium bodied Shirazes, which are quite bright and yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting too because they just have yeah, they're just such a unique character, but I wanna ask you this too because I I approach things from, like, the dumbest common denominators level, and how does yeah, I have a very inquisitive 10-year-old that sits next to me and asks me, "Hey, dad, how does this work? How does this work?" And I'm just like, "I don't know." But I'll ask people who do. If you had, like, a 10-year-old ask you, "How does grape juice become wine?" How would you explain that process in the most simple terms?
So when I started in wine, I had a 8-month-old, and I've got 3 girls, but my youngest has grown up picking, grapes in a pram, and she's just sorta come along often and, with me, and I she's 8 now. Yeah, and she's, 8 now, and I actually asked her this question. I said, "How does grape juice, be made, how do we make it into wine?" And she first up answered, she said, "Are you talking about from when we are, growing it or from when it's picked?" And even that was super interesting to me because I was like, "Oh," so
Ooh,
she has
ooh,
seen me propagate cuttings and
right?
have them in heat beds in my kitchen. So she actually said, I wrote it down. She said, "First you get an open space, then you get a cutting and grow the cutting." So, which we do. Grapevines come from cuttings, and um, that takes 2 to 3 years for them to then establish fruit. And then she said, then you have to keep an eye on them when they are growing. You have to watch them and take care of them and do stuff to them so the grapes don't break and stuff. And so we train them. We train them up onto a wire.
Hmm.
We have to spray, make sure
Wow.
that, watch out for mildews and all that sort of thing. You have to make sure they're watered. Plenty of things you have to do in the vineyard to get them to establish and then start growing your grapes. And then she said, then you pick them when they are ripe. So ripeness is the right sugar, the right alcohol, the right fruit ripeness. So if your seeds are ripe, if your skins are ripe for your tannins. And then she said, then you have to put them in a big weird tub. Then you put them through a destemmer thingy. So we have you get them into picking bins, and then, yeah, for if you hand-picked or even machine harvest, you then destem them, which takes the stalks off, so you're just working with the fruit. Some red wines you might leave some on, which gives on the stems, which gives you a whole bunch. And then she said, "Then you have to smush them." So, she's referring to foot stomping, on red wines. So, once you
Yeah.
smush them, it then means that the sugars can be consumed by the yeast. So then you have to put yeast in, and it turns the sugar into alcohol. And so wine does become wine from, yeast turning the sugar into alcohol. Um, and then she said, "Then you put it in the press to press the wine off the
Yeah.
skins." Uh, and then she said, "Then you put it in a big tank." So for, white wines, you generally press them off the skins and ferment them in a big tank. Reds, you'll ferment them on the skins, which gives it the colour, and then you press them off once they're fermented. And then
Yeah.
then you have to get some out of the tap to taste it to make sure that it's right. And so I probably would have missed this because that's just something you
Mm.
do, like, we're forever tasting. And I would have missed that in my process of explaining how do you make wine, that you are tasting to see when it's right. You are doing all that. So I found it fascinating that she recognized that in her head as an important step. Um, and then she said, then you put it in the bottles and then the caps and then the labels and then you need to sell it. So
Right. Wow. I, uh, I almost got a little emotional there at the beginning, and I'm not gonna lie, it's early in the day for me, and I just was thinking about my daughter, but it's like it's not just winemaking, it's like you're parenting to a degree, you plant this thing, and then you set it out into the world, and you're guiding it before it becomes when does a grape become wine? When does a child become an adult? And, that's one of the things I love as our world is going more digital and everything becomes so fast, winemaking is still this slow process. It is still this thing that takes time and takes focus and takes, you know, um, being present. And that's one of the things too, because you've been involved in vineyard management, winemaking, judging, and wine education. What part of all of this do you love the most?
I love that every day something different. You were doing absolutely something different every day. One day I'll be in the vineyard, the next
Yeah,
day I'll be putting wine to a barrel, the next day I'll be in trade trying to sell the wine. It really is something different each day. I guess what I love the most about it is the people. Like when I started in wine, I guess I was coming from a place where I had lost interest in my job I was doing. I found that spark again. I found that passion, those people, the people in. You don't go into wine for the money. It doesn't pay well. You go into it because people are passionate about what they do, and it's sort of like a big family. It's a small industry, I'd say. So you know someone through someone, or someone will give you advice. You've got an issue, and someone even from the States might comment, or say this is what we do here, and everyone's so open. And yeah, so really it's just the people, I think, and the love of what we do.
I love that. I started this podcast because I grew up in the Napa Valley, and I loved watching the people work. I love the smell. I don't think people can understand, like, when harvest comes in, all the grapes start coming in and, like, they start crush. The entire valley smells like wine. It's just this absolutely delicious smell that just is everywhere. My wife was like, didn't believe me, and I was like, "No, it just the whole place will smell like wine," and she's like, "No, that's." And then one day, we were back in the Napa Valley at that time with my mom, and we walked outside to get a cup of coffee. We're walking up to the coffee shop, and she's like,
Mm,
"What's that smell? It's, like, everywhere." And I was like, "That's what it smells like during crush. It's wild. It's
mm.
amazing." She's like, "This is fantastic." And what was special for me is that though the part that was special for me is that the people, all of the people that would be out there, from the people working in the fields to the people working in the wineries, the people working at all parts of the industry, were just down to earth, good people, it was farmers and the people there to support that. But wine industry changed in my hometown. It got very different. It got very, like, uptight, but I wanted to remind people of the people out there doing it, and people out there making wine are just cool people, you know? Certainly, there's some of that, "Yes, this vintage is," but you know what? Most of the Psalms I've met have been the coolest people on the planet, That I had one Psalm describe, this one type of wine as a Rottweiler in a bottle, and I was like, That's the type of description I need for wine. If this is a Rottweiler in a bottle, I wanna know because I need to know it's gonna be that type of night. Sometimes you need a Rottweiler in a
Yeah,
bottle, but
yeah, yeah.
sometimes you want something
I
different, you
going back
know?
to the smell, like I wish you could sort of frame the smell of a Chardonnay in a new oak bottle, a new oak barrel as it's fermenting. It is like one of the nicest smells you could ever smell. So yeah, I 100% agree that the winery smell when everything's fermenting is absolutely delicious. Um, my
It's
newest label, I do a
so
Touriga Shiraz
amazing.
Grenache, and I call it a TSG. And I hate the snobbery of wine. I'm really not into the snobbery
Ooh,
of wine. And so I said, it might have been my 12-year-old, I said, "What's TSG mean?" She's like, "Totally slayed it, guys." So that's what's on my label.
that's rad, and that is a bottle of wine that I need to try. Next time I'm in Australia, I'm there with you because Totally Slate It, guys, is absolutely awesome. I wanna ask you this though, because, like, we're touching on something here, and one thing I noticed from your post is how much you care about the future of wine industry and supporting younger professionals, and helping shape the direction this whole industry is going. Like, to me, why is mentorship and education so important in wine and so important in
Yeah,
general,
well, I
you know?
think you have the side of wine where you've come from a family of winemaking, and you've grown up in that. Um, you have that legacy, and you move into that role. There's also the side of wine where you come fresh, like I did. And so yeah, I was early 30s coming into a career which I knew nothing about. And I was really fortunate to have a few good mentors at that time. I was a single mum with 3 kids under 8, I think, at that time, and to do vintage, to work, 7 days a week for, a month or 2 is really hard unless you've got people that help support you and provide that flexible environment. And that's a really big barrier, I think, for people coming into the industry, especially females. Is yeah, trying to have that flexibility with family and during vintages, yeah, it's certainly really, really tough, and we're losing a lot of people because they can't balance everything. So because I was fortunate to have a lot of really good mentors and people help me get through that, and then obviously make a good career out of it. I find it really important to give that back and make sure that those that are younger, starting and have no idea, that they've got people that they can lend to and help them through and guide them, because we do have an aging population in the industry, which are, they're retiring out, and we don't have people coming in. So it's just trying to get that retention of younger, and not even younger, but people that don't have experience, and guiding them into retaining them in the industry.
I've noticed this many times, and this is something that they talk about in California as well, that the age of the consumer is also higher than what they would like, but yet the wine industry is not doing a lot to fix that. They're not trying to go for these younger generations. There are actually a couple really cool wineries in the Napa area. Tank Garage is one cool one with Ed. They're doing awesome stuff. Like, their marketing is great. It's fun. It is just in your face and cool. But so many wineries are still like, let's give people a drone shot and like, let's advertise. Here we go. Here's a beautiful shot of our video. Like, okay, but what are you selling? Like, I would prefer your TSG wine any day just because of the way you're framing it, to something that just is like, we're gonna market with a beautiful picture that's a wide shot of our facility. Like, man, I don't care what your building looks like. I care about the stories behind the wine. And, and I think that one of the things is they're not trying to tell those stories. And like, also, they're not trying to get into the right places. Like, you've made a really interesting point about concerts. And this is something that I notice too. When I go out to concerts, there's tons of beer, there's spirit options, but like almost no wine. And I was in Vegas recently with my wife, and we were going out and having some fun in Vegas, and I had to hunt for a good glass of wine, and, like, beer everywhere, cocktail lounges everywhere. But for me to get a good glass of wine, I had to go and look all over the building, and that was wild that even in Vegas, you know? But why do you think wines sometimes struggle to connect with younger audiences, or more casual audiences?
That event that I went to was an Oasis concert, so sold out, massive in Australia, and I could not get a glass of wine. I'm not a big beer or spirit drinker, so it was just super interesting for me to see, and that was actually a rule that the event could only have 3.5% alcohol sold there. So for a wine, there's obviously a lot of research into that space, trying to get the no and low, but we're just not quite there yet. The lower alcohol wines just don't have the same taste or quality, I feel, yet, that, say, the equivalent beer or spirits do. I think you look at that, you go, well, I know Tui's new, year on year, no matter where you go, that bottle's going to taste exactly the same. Same with an RTD or a spirit. So they're an easy market, I would say. Easy to go, and you go, oh, I know exactly what I'm getting. Wine is different. It's different year on year. Some of the larger, commercial wineries can make a wine to a recipe, and you do know that, okay, if I buy that, it's going to be exactly what I think it is, exactly the same as the previous bottle that you've had. Um, so I think for smaller formats, like wine in a can, we're really trying to do that would work well at venues and things like that. But again, we're not quite there yet on wine in a can. It doesn't let it breathe as much. So then you have reduction issues in the wine in the can. So there's there's that side of things, and then I think there's the side, like you say, of, not marketing to younger people, not doing the right thing, like you people who say drink beer, they're not turning around and saying, "Oh, what vintage have you got?" or "What region is it from?" or that pressure or that conversation about you just don't have it. There's no snobbery there. Whereas wine, yeah, you feel pressured to, "Oh, is this a good vintage? Is this gonna be nice? Is this" yeah, I just think there's that we need to transition out of that and just make it, do you enjoy drinking it? Is it what do you wanna drink right now? If you're a wine drinker, and no matter where you are, let's drink wine. Let's not, worry about vintage and all that sort of stuff and names and yeah.
I had this time period where as I was learning more about wine, I was trying to get into it and understand things, and I was just like, "Well, what vintage is this? What year is this? What, varietal is this?" And one of the things I said, "Just buy something, ignore all the rest, and just try it," you know? And so I'd go in and tell the person at the shop that I really trusted, "Recommend something to me. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to, like, be, in your opinion, something that's special." And I got some of the best recommendations, and I ignored the year, ignored everything else, and I just tried to taste, and it was one of the things too, is, like, it allowed me a lot more freedom to, like, enjoy, you know, different things, but it forced me to kind of reframe things in a way that I think a lot of people are having a hard time with right now because people want to get into, like, what's really trendy or special. And this is a problem with our whole generation right now. We love trends, and my daughter was like, "I wanna buy this new thing," and I said, "Why?" "Because it's trending right now," and I was like, "Oh god." Well, I mean,
Yeah.
"Do you like it?" "Well, I don't know, but my friends all have it." I said, "But do you like it? Is it something that you actually care about?" And I mean, trends can be great, but I think that one of the things that I wanna do is to find ways to experience, to taste, and to form my own opinions, you know? And I think that takes a little bit of courage to think different, to be different, you know?
And I think it's, trying things. When I met my partner, he didn't drink wine at all. He was like he just had this preconceived conception of, "No, I don't like it," because 'cause he'd tasted something at some point which wasn't nice. He now loves it. And it's just
Yeah.
from trying, and he'll now be going like, "Oh, I like that variety over that variety," and it's yes, I think it's trying to push through that barrier of people thinking, "Oh, I don't like it," or, red wine is a strong flavor. If you have a bad red wine, it will put you off. So it's
Yeah.
trying, yeah.
I've been there. Like, I had a bad red wine early on, and I was just like, "Nope, I'm never trying that again." And then I had a really good red wine. And it was wild that I actually had some bad white wine experiences. And then of late, I got back into white wine because I had some really great whites. And it was awesome because it was, again, coming up to, I just had to try more things to kind of redefine that. But I want to ask you a little bit of personal taste. If you had to pour 3 glasses for someone right now that didn't know a lot about wine, what 3 glasses are you
Hmm.
pouring?
That is a very good question. Um, I think so in Australia right now, well, in my market, Pinot Gris is the fastest selling white variety. I can see why. It's easy drinking. It's not offensive. You don't have to think a huge amount about it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if someone new to wine, I would go a Pinot Gris. Uh, and then sparkling. I would do a glass of sparkling. I think that again, it's something that people look at as a celebratory drink, but it's actually really delicious, and it's similar in the Pinot Gris vein that, you can have so many different styles, so just something, to make them aware of a sparkling, traditional method, I think, and then I would go a maybe even a Tempranillo for a red. Something that's a little bit fruity, a little bit lighter,
Mhm.
something that's, yeah, going to not be too tannic, not too aggressive. Um, yeah, just some of those varieties that are easy to get into, I think.
I like that. I love the sparkling angle. I try to recommend for some people. I get my wife rosé when she is drinking with me because she's not a wine drinker, but she can handle rosé, and it's one of the superpowers I have so that she'll enjoy a glass of wine with me. But I wanna ask you this one because the winemakers and growers, everything, there's always challenges, but what do you think are the biggest challenges winemakers and growers are facing
Yeah,
today,
well, I don't
especially in
think it's
Australia?
just in Australia, but we have an oversupply issue. I think, so,
Yeah.
we had a big market into China, especially with Shiraz, so we extended a lot of plantings in Australia, to accommodate that, and then, China put in the tariffs, and we've got, like, 262 million litres of excess wine in Australia this year. So that then impacts growers. So wineries can't take in any more wine. They're not buying fruit from growers.
Mhm.
And then you've just got this excess market where fruit's low. Um, Growers aren't making any money. There's a big removal at the moment from growers. I work with one who I buy my Nero and Shannon from, and he normally
Mm.
sells a couple of thousand tons a year. This year he sold 200 tons. So for him, that's like over $1 million loss in income in 1 year.
Wow.
And that's just on a small scale. That's not one of the really large vineyards or producers in Australia. So, yeah, as I said, I don't think that's just Australia. I think that's an issue that's happening in a lot of wine growing regions. But it impacts the whole supply chain because then you've got, you know, growers that don't have work or fruit coming in. You've got people drinking less wine, so there's less wine sales. Um, yeah, there's just a it's really hard. It's really hard in the industry at the moment.
It's interesting too because one of the things that, um what was it? Like, whether it be an oyster or a diamond, that pressure causes things to shift and evolve, you know? So I'm hoping that this pressure can help the wine industry evolve and maybe come out better for it, you know? What's really important? How do you really connect with an audience? I think that, um people like to chase the flashy stuff. We like to chase those big markets. "Oh, we've got this big market over here. Let's run after them," instead of, you know, how do we make great wine? And I mean, I'm sure everyone was asking that the whole way. But, like, I think that one of the thing that I think is so important to me is sustainability, you know, and not sustainability just in the land, but of, like, how do we have an industry that is not overreaching and not just trying to chase down the newest trend to actually be, 'cause that's like the number of wineries that opened in California is insane. It was an absolutely insane number, and I'm gonna throw some of the Silicon Valley type under the bus here, like, they were all coming up and going, I'm now a winery owner," and yes, you are, but, like, you know, it's just one more thing, and, like, I think that when I was younger, I got to meet some of these people that were 2nd, 3rd generation winemaking families, some of them way older than that, and when I met them, like, what I found was that winemaking wasn't as flashy as everyone made it. It was just a process that people did and they loved. And, you know, I feel like sometimes when we chase this excess, some of that love dissipates. I make videos, and if I made 1,000 videos a month for my own brand, I'm gonna promise you that sometimes that quality might not be there as much, you know, unless I actually expand everything and I have a huge team, but even still, people are gonna be like, "Do I need that much?" You know, and I don't know if this is making sense what I'm talking about, but I don't know. I feel like there's this, you know, coming back to your roots type of a thing that I'm saying maybe this helps people figure out why we're doing what we do. Why are people making this beautiful thing in the first place? And to me, it's all about bringing people together. You know, it's all about creating that central shared space where we can all
Mm,
enjoy this thing at the
yep,
same time.
100% agree.
You're involved with wine judging and training programs. Like, when you taste a wine, what separates a good wine from one that really sticks with you? Like something that really you're gonna be like, "Yeah, I wanna remember
Yeah,
that one."
good question. So judging, you will taste 100 wines blind, and it will be you go back afterwards, and once the results are out and you go, "Oh, this is what I thought of this," and you look for the ones that you really loved and you go, "Oh, why did I love that?" What do they do? You might, look into the producer and see what techniques they use and things like that. And that's what I love about judging is in you get to try such an array of wines which you wouldn't necessarily, especially being a salt like I work by myself all the time. I'm not going to open 20 bottles of wine to be able to taste and benchmark and things like that. So in a judging scenario, some of those golds and top golds that come out, you sit then you just go, "Oh my God, that is a cracking wine." Like that is, and you look at it technically. I think for me, some of the best wines are where you have them and who you have them with. I was at when I first fell in love with Pinot, and it sticks in my head. I was at a wine bar with friends, and we had it was a Pinot by Fire in Geelong, and it was just such a great night, and it made the wine so special. And I woke up the next day going, "Oh my God, that was such a good wine. I want to try it again," and I did, and it wasn't quite as great as the night before. It was 100% beautiful, but it was that environment and the people you were with, and that's where I think the memories of the wine and who makes them and the bottle really sticks with you.
I love that. Some of the best wines that I've had were wine experiences, and it wasn't just the bottle, it was a phenomenal bottle, a delicious bottle, but it was a bottle that was paired with either a location, like we was doing something and we were there at this place, and it was also, um, wines that were gifted to me by winemaking friends, and, sitting there and enjoying it with them, and then going, "Hey, Sean, I just bottled this. You gotta try this. It's goes well with this and this." And I tried it, and I was like, "That was phenomenal." And it was phenomenal because I had a friend hand me a bottle they made. Like, that's special, you know? And that's something that to me is organic and real. Like, I can buy a really, really nice car. This is a weird example, but if someone was like, "Hey, I rebuilt this car," and I hop in
Mm.
there with them, I'm like, this is pretty amazing, you know? But it's interesting too because Australia has such a unique wine culture and landscape, you know? What do you think Australian wine does especially well that people in other countries might not fully
Yeah, I think
appreciate yet?
part of it goes back to what I was saying before. We are allowed to experiment in so many different ways with what we plant and how
Yeah.
we make wine. um, so I think that's one thing that yeah, I think is really cool. And where I guess as a younger, or I say younger, but working out what grows well here. You've got, as I was saying, the Spanish and Italian varieties, which we are now seeing are actually like really, really working well for our climate. Um, we've got some of the new CSIRO have got the Gen 1 powdery and downy mildew resistant varieties, which I've just planted for a vineyard. So, leaning into that,
Mhm.
they're called peewees overseas varieties there. I would say that we have, so we've got an Australian Wine Research Institute, AWRI for short. And in 2020, we had bushfires, which wiped out a lot of the Australian grape going regions. And we were doing smoke research prior to that. But after the 2020 bushfire season, the AWRI put a lot of work into smoke taint research. And we're now seen as a leader in that research worldwide. So they've
That's
found
awesome.
out at what points throughout your growing season when's smoke hit, how much has it hit, how long has it hit for. You can test the fruit, and they'll give you levels to know whether it's generally going to provide smoke taint or not, so that growers have got actual resources to know and be able to have picking decisions. Am I going to pick? Am I going to make that wine? Um, so I think, yeah, Australia's really ahead in that, and it's great to see that we're seen as world leaders in that. Um, Another program which I was on the advisory panel for is gender equality. So Wine Australia and Australian Grape and Wine have done a gender equality toolkit, I guess. And they just spoke at, so it's the International Organization of Vine and Wine. So they collectively represent 85% of the global vineyard area in the world. And so Australia pitched this new toolkit, and it's now going to be used as part of that to roll out, across other countries. So I find it really important for, I guess, my background in disability, but, gender and to inclusion for everybody to be able to work in this great space is really important. So, yeah, I think that's cool that Australia's also leading that as well.
It is. It's like, I think that we are not talking about these things enough, that if we have I look at it this way, right? If you have a room with 20 kids, let's imagine that we're just talking about children, and then you sit there and look at that room and say, "Okay, only half of these are gonna ever be able to go on to become this career." Say scientist. Then you might, in the half that you just say, "Well, we're not gonna let them become scientists," you might have the future Albert Einstein that you just said, no," you know? So if we can make these things accessible to everyone, it gives us the ability to have such beautiful variety, beautiful developments in that. And yet, I mean, especially in the US, we see that things are still very much separated by race, by class, by different types of categories that are by gender, of course, that are things that really shouldn't be inhibiting people from learning these beautiful arts if they want to. But it leads to my next question, my last question. If somebody listening is going, you know what, I would love to do that. They wanted to get into winemaking someday. What's the best way to start learning? Is it working harvests, studying, tasting, or
Yeah,
just
I
jumping
think
into the
my
industry?
personal experience was I literally went and did a vintage and was like, "I've got the bug." So be careful if you're not, willing to jump in, and you will
Yeah,
get the bug. So if you try it, you will. But I think, yeah, the most you can learn is from the people that are already doing that work. And generally speaking, they will be so happy to share and teach and bring you in. So I think for anyone wanting to get into the industry would be just volunteer to help pick. Ask, can I come and see the process? Can you? Um, yeah, I think it depends on. I mean, we need desperately need more viticulturists and people in the growing side of things. Um, I originally thought, yeah, I'm going to want to be the flashy winemaker. Um, and you do that. It's not that flashy. There's a lot of cleaning and a lot of other stuff that's involved. But so I started my winemaking degree, but then found there's so much in the vineyard that you can do to shape that wine, and it's so important. And there's so much more work opportunity because there's not people don't want to be the farmer. They don't want to be doing the hard yakka. So I
yeah,
think. Yeah, go have a look at the growing side, because it's so interesting. There's so much you can do to help create quality grapes that, then make these beautiful wines. And there's a shortage. There is a shortage.
I love that. Well, where can people go to find out more about you and your
Intrepidus
wine?
Wines is my Instagram. And then, yeah, also on LinkedIn or my website, intrepiduswines.com.au.